Well, we certainly made a big leap from we're not going to be the world's policeman to horrific photos of children who were suffering after a gas attack. Looks like we're gearing up for military intervention in Syria. 855-40-LAURA. On Life Zet, in a few moments, we are going to have a piece posted on the 5 atrocities, human rights atrocities, against children that the United States has not acted against, not responded to. But we have, 100 people dead in Syria, and again, it's horrific. No one's going to doubt that it's not a horrific act. But how many of you feel like this is just slowly but surely dragging the United States into another war in the Middle East? I mean, it's all the same people. It's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. The same people who were wrong about what we were going to accomplish by going into Iraq and did no mea culpa when it all fell apart. Those are the same people on television over the last 24 hours who are urging the United States to do something. Marco Rubio was on all the cables yesterday with his comment implying that it was Trump's lack of action that caused this. So Trump's lack of action or saying that he's not going to get involved caused this. You know what caused this? A twisted tribal mentality in the Middle East. Assad, a bad actor. Yeah, Hussein, a bad actor. Mubarak, in some cases, a very bad actor. Also happened to be allied with us on a bunch of issues. But I'm not following what the foreign policy strategy is here. And the president says he's not going to tell us. The president says he's not going to reveal it to the press, not going to reveal it. But think about the Boko Haram atrocities in Africa. Think about that. Think about the hundreds of thousands of people in the Central African Republic who are in imminent risk of starvation. Think of the young boys and men that were set afire, locked into their homes and schools. Just a few years ago, we reported on it. Also in South Sudan, burned to death. More than 100 people burned to death. Oh, of course it was. We've had thousands upon thousands of Africans burned to death as Islamist groups go town to town using a blowtorch as a greeting device. But the same people are urging more military intervention. I'd love to see this put up to a referendum and the American people. Donald Trump did not win the election by saying he was going to do Bush foreign policy. He didn't win it that way. He won it by having a very pragmatic foreign policy. And you get the sense that and we'll get into the Bannon thing later on, but you see these forces hovering about the White House, hovering around the White House. They're itching to get back into power. The same people who saw our wealth evaporate from the United States, the thousands of lives we've lost, for what? What have we accomplished in the Middle East? We have a massive crisis still in Iraq. We still haven't won the peace in Afghanistan. We still have Taliban attacks in Afghanistan regularly. We have special forces on the ground right now in Syria. We have at least one was killed. But you just get the sense that it's going to start with airstrikes, and then that's not going to be enough. Then Russia's going to. Man, I hope really, really smart people who didn't make the same mistakes before, I really hope they're involved in all of this. Because I could find a lot of photos that I could send over to the Oval Office for Donald Trump to look at of what's happened to children all over the world because of Islamist incursions, atrocities, horrors, and a lot more than we've seen just in the last week in Syria. And no doubt about it, Syria's civil war, it's a civil war. 250,000 people have died. It's a calamity. What is the Arab League? What is the Arab League doing? Why aren't they leading in this charge against Assad? If Assad is the problem, why don't they lead the charge against Assad? The deafening silence. 855-40-LAW. Richard Haas was talking about this challenge today on MSNBC.
This is actually something of a real opportunity for Donald Trump. It's his way to say there's a new sheriff in town. And when the United States is more prepared to act than it was. So I think in Syria, actually, given what he said yesterday, and even if he hadn't said it, I believe there's a need to act there militarily.
Oh, my God. If he starts listening to Richard Haas, I mean, again, he's the elite's go-to guy to interpret the world events. And last time I checked a few years back, he was telling everybody that Russia's just a regional power. Didn't have to worry about Russia. And there's never the same analysis no to China. But China is a real power, unlike Russia. China's a real power. We're going to have to deal with China. We're going to have a different approach with China. But I just see where all of this is going. And I just hope that President Trump keeps those around him who are going to keep him true to his original agenda, which was America first, economic nationalism, put China in a corner on trade, redo our trade deals with countries like Mexico, and get this economy going with the deregulatory efforts, the tax reform efforts, and the Obamacare repeal efforts. He said, and we have soundbite after soundbite after soundbite during the debates, that we're not going to be the world's policeman. Long soundbites. We're not going to be the world's policeman. We're not going to waste trillions of dollars. And now what? Who's he going to listen to now? More of the Bush people that are working in the National Security Council? Last time I checked, Jeb Bush ran and lost. And Marco Rubio now thinks he's getting his payback by criticizing Donald Trump on this? You think it's time for America to start another military intervention in Syria? Because they're having children read pleas to the United States. Children are on camera who are refugees in Turkey saying, please help, please help, please help. I'm not saying there's nothing that the United States can do. But the last time I checked, we're $19 trillion in debt and counting. And the last time I checked, we have big problems here in the United States. Don't treat the military like a jobs program where we're going to create jobs because we're going to have so many military interventions that we're going to need a bigger military. Bigger, 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 and bigger. These are real people's lives are going to be affected and real money to launch any type of major strike against Syria. And if it's necessary, we better be getting all the help from all of our Arab partners who always seem to be Johnny-come-latelys in any of these efforts. I can tell you who's not going to be getting involved. China. Well, they don't want to waste their money. 855-40-LAW. Your reaction to this and a lot more coming up. Your calls. Also, Alan Tunnelson's going to join us, one of the smartest thinkers on our relationship with China. What should Trump get in any negotiations with China? All coming up. Don't go away.
You can say that will still be true.
The world is a mess. I inherited a mess. Whether it's the Middle East, whether it's North Korea, whether it's so many other things, whether it's in our country, horrible trade deals. I inherited a mess. We're going to fix it.
If you're wondering how to get the funding needed to run a small business today, Kabbage has the answer. That's Kabbage with a capital K, and it helps small business owners access simple and flexible funding right away without the headaches that come with applying for a traditional loan. Apply online or from your phone by securely linking your business information to get an automatic decision. There's no waiting in line, scanning documents, or tracking down financial statements. Kabbage gives you the flexibility to decide what's best for your business. And once you're approved, you choose when to use your funds and how much to take. You're only going to pay for the funds you actually use. Kabbage has supported over 100,000 small businesses with $2.9 billion in funding. Visit Kabbage.com/Laura. That's Kabbage with a K. There is no cost to apply or set up for your line of credit. As a Laura Ingraham listener, when you qualify for funding, you're going to get a $100 Visa gift card you can use anywhere. That's Kabbage with a K. Kabbage.com/Laura.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
You're seeing now the president on Syria, on North Korea, on China here today, on the reorganization of the NSC. He's recognizing, as much as he wants to be unorthodox, the world, the country sees the president as the indispensable person in dealing with these issues. And I think you're seeing him act more like a normal president on these issues in the last couple of days, particularly yesterday in the Rose Garden.
All right. Is being a normal president over the last 20 years wasting money in wars that make us weaker, deplete our armed forces, and result in thousands of people dead? Is that being a normal president, or being a normal president realizing the limits of what we can do in a place as screwed up as Syria? The limits of what American power can do. Otherwise, we should be in Africa right now, because, I mean, you could really pinpoint problems there. 855-40-LAURA. I'm going back and looking from October 6, 2015. Trump calls former George W. Bush a disaster, focusing on the waste of resources, focusing on how you can't trust the Syrian rebels, how the biggest waste of time, the biggest waste of time would be for the United States to waste its resources and its manpower in a country like Syria. It goes on and on and on. But now he's being a normal president, says Mark Halperin. Well, to them, what is normal? And what do you want? Let's go to Dan, Nevada, line 5. Danny.
Hey there. I agree we should not be the world's police, but I think we should be the world's hired hitman available to these countries and the innocent to pay to surgically take out the bad guys we don't agree with. Let them pay let them pay us in oil or whatever to wipe the stage clean.
That's what the framers intended? Is that what the framers intended for America, that we're the world's hitmen? And go back and read John Adams.
Yeah, but it's what we did in Japan, and it's what we did in Germany. And look at those countries now. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, if you want to think that, if you want to equate what's happening in the Middle East to World War II, I guess we could do that, but I don't see the comparison there at all. We had massive alliances, and the United States got involved after America was attacked in Pearl Harbor, and we had a massive power struggle between the Nazis and the Russians, and the United States decided to align with Russia because we had to work with someone to stop Hitler. And then of course Japan got involved. But those were battles against great world powers and with world powers. I don't see this to be the same at all. I mean, it's a horrific atrocity. And there are many of them that are occurring every day around the world at the hands of Islamists. I think what we should do is do the extreme vetting that he's doing right now, make sure we don't keep importing people into the United States who are sympathetic to an agenda that allows someone like Assad in power, and make sure we're taking care of business at home, depleting our resources and becoming weaker and weaker and weaker year after year after year. That's not going to keep us free. I don't think that's going to keep us an independent country at all. I mean, have we gotten stronger and stronger? Did we get stronger over 8 years of George W. Bush, or did we become a weaker nation? I would argue that we became a much weaker nation, both in terms of our debt level. We lost the House, we lost the Senate, and we lost the presidency. We didn't put America first. We were putting the Middle East first, though. Let's go to George in Texas. Line 1, George.
Hey, how you doing, Laura? Laura, the first bomb that he drops on Assad and Syria will be it for us deplorables. And all you got to do is look online and see what's going on and see what people are thinking. I don't believe Assad did this. I don't agree that he's a bad guy. I think Assad is pretty much trying to save his nation from the Islamic radicals that are trying to take it over. He's a big defender of Christianity, and everybody else in his Syrian Arab army is made up of different sects of people and loyal to Assad. There's no way he did that. I believe in Santa Claus before I believe that Assad.
I've got to say, I don't see the logic of Assad doing that. I have no idea what happened, but logically, it makes no sense. It just makes no sense to me. And a lot of people agree with you. You start reading online, people who've studied this region, who know how these pictures of these kids, and it's heartbreaking, the videos, they're playing it in an endless loop. But why just the Syrian atrocities? Why don't we play an endless loop of the girls, the children being taken at age 8 and 9 and being raped by Boko Haram and other Islamist guerrillas all throughout Central Africa? The stories that the mothers tell of what's being done to these young girls in front of them, tied up in front of them. I went back and read them yesterday as I was thinking about our selecting this atrocity to be outraged by. When you really start to think of this, get out of the cable mindset moment for a second and think about what's happening around the world, and then think about what America's role, first and foremost, what is the duty of America to her citizens? To make sure this country is safe and free, and that our economy is not hampered by unnecessary entanglements. Well, George Washington understood that. Let's go back and read Washington on foreign entanglements. Trump will be in Mar-a-Lago with President Xi for the next 2 days. They all go down there today, and, well, we don't got Bob Lighthizer. We don't have Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative. He's still not confirmed. As Congress gets ready for a 2-week recess. Should they be going on recess for 2 weeks? I'd keep them all, and I'd say to Trump, if I were Trump, I'd say, you're all staying in town. I'm coming back from this Florida summit, and this is going to get done. We're going to figure this out together. 855-40-LAURA. We'll get to all your calls. Lifeset.com. Check it out throughout the day.
You mentioned the Chinese president. What should we anticipate today with that, sir?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. Nobody really knows. We have not been treated fairly on trade for many, many years. No president's taken care of that the way they should have. And we have a big problem with North Korea. We're going to see what happens.
So the hope is to get them to bring leverage on the issue in North Korea.
Well, we're going to see what happens, Pete. But I will tell you, we'll be in there pitching, and I think we're going to do very well.
Well, we'll see at the Sunshine Summit. In a moment, we're going to talk to Alan Tunnelson. It was a great piece on LifeZet. Trump must avoid a North Korean trap at the China Summit. You already heard Michael Pillsbury. Big warning from him yesterday on this show. Pillsbury, one of the foremost experts on China over the last 25, 30 years, said China's coming in because China wants in early on some sweetheart deal where it gets much more influence and breathing room with its its base building, taking those islands in the South China Sea, moving its sphere of influence ever further out. So we're going to talk to Alan in just a moment on that. Read the piece on LifeZet. It's fabulous. We've got to go to 2 calls at least. Dave, first in Indiana. This Syrian war machine, you can hear the war drums beating. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah. I get that the images are terrible coming out of Syria, but we need to base military action on whether or not a country is threatening its neighbors outside of its own border and not a civil war. Because if we're going to go off of images, I got some images that I saw in the CMP videos that go to the issue of character. There's a very defined set of guidelines when you take military action. But we've also got to ask ourselves, we don't like seeing children die in Syria. I don't like seeing children die over here in a quote-unquote clinic. Okay?
No, it's disconcerting. I'm not sure I know exactly what you're talking about there. Let's go to Sean in Pennsylvania, line 2. Sean.
Hey, Laura, big fan. You're really on to something here with talking about what the media has been ignoring, which is us supporters of Trump. We're really losing heart with him. And the Syria thing is another example. You're right. He was very explicit. We're not going to get into these wars anymore, and now he's talking about doing it. For me, he already lost me with the health care thing. I mean, health care for us we gave him Congress, we gave him the Senate, now we gave him the presidency, and they still are not talking about full and complete repeal. I mean, what happened to the Paris Accord? Why didn't he just pull out of that? He's going back on his word, and it seems like the only thing he's doing are cosmetic things. Like the sanctuary cities. Oh, well, we'll just pull Department of Justice funding. That's not going to stop San Francisco. Pull all their federal funding. He's going back on his word, and it's just so frustrating. I don't think I'm going to vote anymore. I mean, I've been doing this for like 12 years, trying to put people in and support people that are going to just do what we want.
Don't jump ship yet. Don't jump ship yet. We got a lot of time here, but I think it is really smart for all of us who believe in the principles of conservatism and more of an economic nationalist view of the world, where America's interests are put first. That's the type of populism that won him this election. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, dealing with China, which he's going to be doing over the weekend. Tough talk on China during the campaign. Or are we going to melt that away over the weekend? Is that going to all melt away because we need help in North Korea? So I hear you, and I think there are going to be a lot more Seans out there if the Democrats who are now influencing policy inside the West Wing, Gary Cohn, I think, unfortunately, to some extent, Jared, Ivanka, Dina Powell, the old Bush aide who's at the National Security Council. I mean, I think it's great to have your family as advisors, and I think it's awesome to have a close family. We all loved that during the campaign. That was so wonderful to see. But you have to remember what he ran on. He did not run on war in Syria. He did not run on giving away the store in China. And he did not run on backdoor meetings with Planned Parenthood, which we read about today in Politico. Ivanka's secret Planned Parenthood outreach. The first daughter and Planned Parenthood's president held an off-the-radar meeting, but have since come to public blows. Why are we meeting with Planned Parenthood? Defund them. And frankly, do what they do to good groups. We do it to a group that they should be demonized for what they do because they are acting demonic in a demonic fashion. Secret meet. We're worried about back channel meetings with Russia, but we're doing back channel meetings with Planned Parenthood, responsible for the deaths of millions of little babies. You want to talk about Trump's talking about little babies? Oh, that's what our caller was talking about, Planned Parenthood clinics. Okay, now the caller was saying, I'll show you some images in clinics. I get it. Wow, this is all coming into focus for me. Alan Tunnelson's one of the greatest thinkers on China, our relationship with China, the business interests in China today that are, I think, affecting already the president's approach to China. He's written a terrific piece about the North Korean trap perhaps being laid for Trump at this Sunshine Summit in Mar-a-Lago. And he joins us now. Alan, sorry I had to do the preface of all of this with my Syrian war concern, but I'm telling you, I hear those.
I get it fully. I share all those concerns. That is such a losing tar baby proposition for this country, as we should know by now.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did Trump say you can't trust these rebels? How do we know that the rebels didn't blow up that? How do we know that the rebels weren't responsible for putting those chemicals there? You don't know who's doing what in that country.
And the Middle East is so terminally dysfunctional. It is so hopeless. There is no prospect of any American action doing any real good for any length of time, whatever. There's only downside to this.
And we get poorer and poorer, and China gets richer and richer because they don't fire a shot in the Middle East. They're never going to get involved in the Middle East other than selling technology to bad bad actors like Iran. But let's talk about what is in store at this Sunshine Summit. The president addressed it briefly today at this Wounded Warriors event. He said, well, basically, I don't know. We'll see. Is that a dangerous place to start a summit where it's not really clear what the deliverables are going to be?
Based on his own words, and I'm looking at a Financial Times interview that he held earlier this week, we're in a much more specific and actually much more worrisome place. And in fact, it's very much an America last place, not an America first place, because Mr. Trump told those journalists that his plan, at least at that point, and we know things can change, but his plan as of just a few short days ago was to use trade leverage to try to secure more Chinese cooperation in somehow neutralizing the North Korean nuclear weapons threat. And this is a huge problem for two main reasons. One, the key to success for the United States in Northeast Asia is recognizing that North Korea's nuclear weapons program is first and foremost a threat to the local countries, which are all very powerful countries, very wealthy countries, and which should be fully capable of dealing with North Korea on their own. The United States is more than 6,000 miles away. We are doing everything humanly possible to deter any North Korean attack on this country, but the reason that we're at risk now is because we have nuclear defense commitments to Japan and especially in this case to South Korea. And what Washington has needed to do for a long, long time is basically say, look, as many problems as the North Koreans might pose for us, they're much more of a threat to you, South Korea, you, Japan, who have been defense free riding for decades, you, Russia, and you, China, and you deal with it, and we're out of here.
The concern, I think, and playing devil's advocate here, is that we won the peace, we won the armistice in the Korean War, and South Korea is a shining example of free markets and capitalist economy. They actually have big monuments built in Seoul to American forces. They truly are thankful, as they should be, of course, to American forces for liberating them and saving this part of the peninsula. But with the China, and just focusing on what China wants out of this, if we're looking to China to help in North Korea, and China says in response, as Mike Pillsbury indicated, that what China really wants is hegemony over the South China Seas, which is a major shipping pathway for so many vessels bringing trade in and out of the region. They've completely blasted the sovereignty of those of the islands that have been a subject of controversy for years, and they're tired of having to defend their expansionist view of China and the rest of the world. They don't want to defend it any longer.
Laura, I fully recognize that. At the same time, it's imperative that U.S. leaders recognize that the Cold War is long over and that the threat of East Asia and all of its economic resources and all of its military potential coming under the control of one hegemonic power, in this case China, is no longer something that poses a mortal or even a significant threat to the United States. And the reason is that with the demise of a global Cold War threat like the Soviet Union posed, the question of who controls East Asia politically doesn't really matter to us, because whoever is in charge, the region has to trade with the United States. We are the only possible market that could absorb all of the export-focused production that they're engaged in and that they need for their own prosperity. This has been true for decades, even as we've been in charge, and the economic realities would remain completely unchanged if the Chinese in some form took control.
So you think that China's growing influence in the United States, and you see it with massive commercial purchases, corporate purchases, at what point do they exact the type of influence they really want, which is to affect U.S. lawmaking? whether
That's
it's on
a real
patents, patents, intellectual property.
That's a major concern. That's a major concern. That is a separate issue. And I strongly believe, and I think that in this case, President Trump's administration looks to be on the right track. I don't think we should allow any further Chinese direct investment in this economy precisely because of those political influence issues that you just raised, and also because why would a free market country want a state-controlled economy like China's getting a larger and larger footprint in its own economy? That can only tremendously distort economic activity in this country to the detriment of all Americans, and we should certainly welcome foreign investment from free market capitalist countries, but China is not one of them.
Well, we can't invest in China.
It's not friendly either.
Right. I mean, and we can't. It's not like we have any reciprocal rights to do what we want to do in China. I mean, that's one thing. If American individuals can go up and buy a block in Beijing, you can't do that. But we just let them do whatever they want here. They're buying up major construction companies. Mm-hmm. They're bidding on construction projects, as we've seen with Chinese-owned companies like the Tappan Zee Bridge project that they did, and they want to be involved in New York City projects. And, I mean, meanwhile, they get to, if the globalists had their way, they'd be able to bring in their own workforce, which is what the TPP allowed.
Sure. To be sure, there have been some national security-related restrictions that have been placed on some Chinese investments, even by President Obama's administration.
He did that
very
with
late.
The chip
very
maker.
Late in the game.
Yeah, with the chip maker.
Semiconductors, you're right, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that we should want any communist Chinese footprint in this economy at all, because any Chinese company that is big enough to be allowed to play globally is clearly an agent of the Chinese government's interests, and it's clearly receiving major state subsidies that give it important advantages over any American rivals.
All right. Well, this is just a fascinating conversation. I think there's always this rush to run where all the conventional wisdom goes on an issue like North Korea or China. It's like or Syria. You throw up some horrific images of children, and then it's like, okay, what are we going to do militarily? It's like,
and Laura, and in fact, there's one more fundamental problem that's at work here, and that is that if you think about the numbers of U.S. policy analysts who have government experience or who know that policy-making process well and who hold what you might call Trumpian worldviews, their numbers are very, very slim. And so it's quite understandable, however regrettable, that the president has had to rely for the most part on much more conventional thinkers, especially in this national security field. And that is a problem that I think is going to dog his administration for certainly its whole first term.
Unbelievable.
His bench is very thin.
Well, I would agree, and we don't want to put the same people back in power who lost us all that wealth and lost us all the men, women maimed, killed in these ridiculous conflicts, and we just can't go back there. That was defeated in the election. The Bushes lost in the last election.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
And yet we see the return of what you might call Bushism at the Defense Department, at the State Department, at the National Security Council. It's exactly what Americans, like you said, have emphatically rejected.
Alan Tunnelson, great piece in LifeZette. Thank you so much. We'll take a break. Don't go away. Xi Jinping from disgraced to China's paramount leader. CNN banging the war drums on Syria. You want to read both on lifezette.com. Check it out.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
We could have been standing on the Great Wall of China.
There's no reason for us to fall into the mistaken belief that we must either be in a hot war or a cold war with China.
China is a real country with a real economy. Its future is totally dependent on access to the region and the world. What they want to do is have things stable. this is really nothing new. The whole Deng Xiaoping philosophy of China, stable exterior so we can do the political and economic development at home. This needs to continue. And it becomes a very different century.
You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show. Richard Haas, he's the guru to the elite set in Manhattan. Worked for a number of different presidents at the State Department. And you just look at the difference between the way they treat Russia and the way they treat China in their discussions. He actually referenced that. And it's very different from Russia.
Imagine the United States and China can deal with North Korea. Imagine we can deal with climate issues. Imagine we can avoid a trade war. It is a fundamentally different 21st century than if the United States and China begin to mimic the pattern, say, of the United States and the Soviet Union. There's a school of thought that thinks this negative future is inevitable. I think it would be the great failure of diplomacy and statecraft of this century if the United States and China ended up at loggerheads. I think the future is yet to be written here. So I think there's a real opportunity. And what this summit this week does, it's a small step, but it's the small step to get these countries on the right trajectory.
Last time I checked, Richard Haas didn't really have any problem with China's massive cheating on trade deals. Didn't talk a lot about China's desire to redraw maritime borders and have its neighbors in the United States fearing that the next move is going to be against Taiwan, wants to extend its sphere of control and influence in one of the key shipping lanes in the world. And we know what they've wanted to do with taking control of both the East China Sea and the South China Sea, which is the Mediterranean, basically the Mediterranean of East Asia. And it's begun, well, a lot of people are making more ominous comparisons to another part of Europe, and the Atlantic wrote about this. It's a fragmented region that was the famous trigger for the First World War, the Balkans. Think about this. This is a terrific piece, by the way. A mere 25 miles off the shore of Palawan sits the frontier of an increasingly dangerous and unpredictable struggle. Its origins lies in China's intensifying efforts to remake the maritime borders of this region, just as surely as Russia would like to remake Europe's political map in places like Crimea and Ukraine. Only here the scale is vastly larger, the players more numerous, and the complexity greater. Moving with ever greater boldness, Beijing has begun pressing claims to ownership of more than 80% of the South China Sea, waters enclosed by what it calls its 9-dash line, a relic of the country's early 20th century nationalist era. See, the Russia wants to go back to the motherland era. China wants to go back to the early 1900s, when it first sketched to indicate China's view of its traditional prerogatives. The line has no international standing and has gone largely unremarked upon until China recently revived it. It now figures in all of Chinese maps. So all the maps that kids see when they study in China all include this greater territory than they are internationally allowed to claim as their own. They have no claim to this territory, but in a century past they did. Since 2012, it has been embossed in new passports issued to the country's citizens. So this new map, they're already getting ready for the Chinese population to understand China's growing sphere of influence. Also known as the cow's tongue for the way it dangles from China's southern coast, the line encloses a region through which roughly 40% of the world's trade and a great majority of China's imported oil passes via the Strait of Malacca. As through the eye of a needle, an observation from the 16th century, whoever is lord of Malacca has his hand on the throat of Venice, still conveys the region's maritime importance. If China can impose its will in the South China Sea, this contradicts the view of our previous guest, Alan Tunnelson. At least 5 rival claimants, all much smaller, weaker Asian states, will be limited to a narrow band of the sea along their coastlines. China would gain greater security for its crucial supply lines of oil and other commodities, exclusive access to rich fishing areas, and potentially vast undersea oil deposits, a much larger buffer against what it regards as a U.S. naval intrusion. And not least the prestige and standing it has long sought, becoming in effect the Pacific's hegemon, and positioning itself to press its decades-old demand that Taiwan come under its control. Arguably, it would achieve the greatest territorial expansion by any power since Imperial Japan's annexation of large swaths of Asia in the first half of the 20th century. So this is China's desire, a full-fledged expansion across this key maritime channel, and they're already well underway. We have a treaty with Taiwan. Yeah, a defense treaty. 855-40-LAURA. So what's the bigger threat to the United States? Richard Haas was saying, he's from the, I think, Brookings Institution. He said the bigger threat is not Russia, it's China. I mean, excuse me, it's not China, it's Russia. Because China's they need us to trade with. They need us to trade with. So the bigger threat is always going to be Russia. Russia's a fraction of the size of China and has a fraction of the size of the economy. I mean, I'm talking about population. Fraction of the size of the economy in China. You see how we treat China so differently than we treat other countries? They get a free pass on human rights violations. They get a free pass on this expansionist mindset. They get a free pass on stealing our intellectual property. All too often, they get a free pass on cheating. Trump said he's going to change all that. I hope that's part of the agenda this weekend.
And by the way, China's not the only one. But
And Richard Haas is spending all this time today and others talking about how, there's a great opportunity with China. There's a great opportunity here. There's a great opportunity for rich people to make more money in China, that's for sure.
When was the last time you saw something? We beat China in trade.
855-40-LAURA. So the president setting out to have this big confab with China, and we hope for the best, but I'm concerned. The Democrats are in a full-fledged, assault against Trumpism, populism, economic nationalism, and the America First foreign policy inside the West Wing. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say that? It's not just Steve Bannon getting edged out, and Steve Bannon, there's clearly sharp elbows being thrown at him. Not just that. We have the growing influence of Goldman Sachs's Democrat in charge of a increasing portfolio. I'm not talking about Jared Kushner, son-in-law. I'm talking about Gary Cohn. And Gary Cohn has increasingly managed to get the president's ear. And along with Dina Powell, who's an old Bushy, who's now at National Security Council, Deputy National Security Director of Strategy, there's clearly an assault against what are the key policies that Trump ran on. Tough on trade, tough on China, the border wall. We already heard grumblings about the border wall from Homeland Security Secretary yesterday. I'll get into that story. Big story today about that in the New York Times. So the border wall under assault by the legislators on Capitol Hill, like Mitch McConnell and others who are burrowed inside the administration. We have the push against getting tougher on immigration. That's clearly going to be pushed by the business interests. And now Trump is being dragged into military intervention into Syria. You see that happening. How many of you saw that happening all day yesterday? And Michael Hayden, let's play this. He was on our show a couple of weeks ago that Michael Hayden, you can't get any more establishment than the former director of national intelligence for the Bush administration. It's all getting, now that we've sidelined Bannon and we're working with China, things are getting back to, quote, normal.
What we have done is swung back to normal. We've also added the director of Central Intelligence Agency, the DNI, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is the traditional structure. And frankly, if I were in the meeting with Mr. Bannon there, I'd kind of think that was the political commissar at the end of the table, and that might have a chilling effect on meaningful discussion.
You know what the chilling effect was? Chilling effect was against those who wanted to turn Trump into Mr. Globalist. Steve Bannon, in a position to give input in key ways and on key issues, reminds everybody in those meetings how Trump got elected. Trump did not get elected by doing Bush foreign policy. That is not how he got elected. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan wanted strong stances on our trade deals. They wanted America first. They did not vote for America to once again get bogged down into the Middle East. That is not what won Trump this election. And if he gets pulled into the direction of Gary Cohn and the Bush's proxy, Dina Powell, and the National Security Council, mark my word that this will be a one-term presidency. Mark my word. Bushism is over, except in the minds of the Bushes and all of their acolytes. And then when you have Democrats who are just wanting to push this globalist agenda inside the West Wing, well, we know where that's going to take us. Further in debt, ceding more of our power to China, giving more of our wealth away. That is exactly what's going to happen. And meanwhile, Congress is taking a 2-week break as they announced Devin Nunes got pushed off the House Intel Committee. Here are two things I don't like. Bannon getting in any way sidelined and Devin Nunes getting pushed off House Intel. None of that is good. Well, the Democrats are getting what they want. They've demonized Bannon. And all my sources are telling me Jared Kushner is using Joe Scarborough as his proxy to bash morning, noon, and night. Bash Bannon morning, noon, and night. So Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, bashing the strong populist who helped manage this campaign to victory. 36-year-old. Okay? What did that old employee of Kushner's say yesterday? I saw that soundbite in our packet. There was some employee who was talking about the experience Trump's son-in-law has on geopolitical matters, politics, all these intractable issues.
Yeah, well, let's take it for granted that Ivanka is right and he is smart and talented. You still have to come back to the fact that if he were not married to the president's daughter, he wouldn't be in any of these positions. There are interns on Capitol Hill who have more domain expertise than Jared has. So, I hope that he succeeds. I think anyone who's, a patriot wants to see this administration do well. But I'm skeptical because I just don't think that his experience is necessarily transferable to what he's doing now.
You can't fire your son-in-law. Talk about a chilling. You want to know what a chilling effect is, Michael Hayden? Chilling effect is being in a meeting with Jared Kushner if you're a populist, economic populist. That's a chilling effect, I would imagine. It's pretty tough to go into a meeting with, you got the family members, you got the president, you got the Democrat Gary Cohn, and then you have these core group of people who actually helped Trump shape his agenda. Trump had these instincts all along, these populist instincts. But Bannon and Kellyanne and Stephen Miller, these people helped shape this whole agenda. And now they're being sidelined? Do you think Devin Nunes leaving the House Intel Committee on the Russia investigation is a good thing? I can tell you who's happy. Nancy Pelosi's happy. Chuck Schumer's happy. Adam Schiff's happy. They're happy. Maybe some establishment Republicans are happy. Oh, John McCain, right. John McCain's happy. Lindsey Graham's happy. And who's happy about Bannon being sidelined? Any of the supporters of Donald Trump who believed in these issues? Who's happy? Joe Scarborough, the Bushes, who else? Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, the list goes on and on. So who's he making happy with these moves? 855-40-LAURA. Warning, 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 Will Robinson.
But that won't happen to us, 'cause it's always been a matter of trust.
Devin Nunes has earned my trust over many years for his integrity and his dedication to the critical work that the intelligence community does to keep Americans safe. He continues to have that trust, and I know he is eager to demonstrate to the Ethics Committee that he has followed all proper guidelines and laws. In the meantime, it is clear that this process would be a distraction to the House Intelligence Committee's investigation into Russian interference in our
The edits are a little rough there. In our election. Yeah. Well, Paul Ryan says that he became a distraction. Here's my take on it. Devin Nunes was offered as a sacrifice to the Democrats. You laid down his chairmanship at the altar of what the Democrats are demanding. Why should you dance to the tune of the Democrats? I'm convinced these Republicans do not how to they have no idea how to wield power on Capitol Hill. They have no idea how to do it. So every time Chuck Schumer has a problem, or Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff has a problem, we're going to just do what they want. Devin Nunes is a stand-up person. I'm glad Paul Ryan at least said that. But giving the head of Devin Nunes over to the Democrats in this House Intel Committee is the exactly the opposite of what they should have done. You know what they should have done? They should have gone to the campus and say, Devin Nunes is not only an American patriot, he cares about the future of this country, and the leaking of national intelligence to media and others for political purposes. If this was done, we're going to make sure that someone goes to jail. We're going to work with the Justice Department. We're going to work with the people who keep the presidential records, and we're going to do an unbiased investigation into what happened, from Russian collusion or Russian efforts to mess with our election to the leaking of documents. And no demonization of Devin Nunes is going to carry any water with us. That's what they should have done. They are oh, my God, I have no word. They are such wimps, whether it's this or sidelining Bannon or kicking Kellyanne to the curb or any of the other people. I'll throw Corey Lewandowski in there. All these people who actually helped Trump win. Now all the Bushes are in. What did I tell you, though? The Bushes never go away. The establishment always claws its way back into power. And they'll use various people. If they have to use Trump family members, they'll use Trump family members. If they have to get someone from Goldman Sachs to come in and take a key position, they'll do whatever they need to do to get back in power. They will get back in power. And if they need to, hold horrible images of kids up to the cameras and play endless loops on their websites to get us involved in another military intervention in the Middle East, they'll do that too. They will do that too. But I am telling you, if Donald Trump goes down the road of George W. Bush in his policies or his advisors, he will be a one-term president, and he will lose spectacularly in 2020. Stick with the people who brought you to the dance, and Bannon and Miller and Kellyanne and these people helped him win. Bob Costa up next.
Hey everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath, a staff writer at Forbes magazine and your new host for a show called Forbes on Trump.
Politicians are all talk, no action.
I'll be speaking with the editors and writers who are reporting on the 45th president. We'll hear what they're finding out about his wealth, his business associates, and the ways in which he and his policies are affecting the economy, consumers, and all aspects of the business world.
Somebody has to come out and tell it like it is.
Along the way, we'll dive into Forbes archives, which contain decades of information that will add context to the current White House administration.
So listen to this.
That's Forbes on Trump on Podcast One.
Subscribe now at iTunes, and don't forget to rate, review, and share.
Bannon just got kicked off the National Security Council.
That's a positive development, but he never should have been on there, because the message that sends to, like, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was removed from the NSC Principals Committee that same day, is that it says politics is at the heart of foreign policy decision making. And I was in hundreds of hours in Situation Room meetings, and we never, ever talked about politics, because it shouldn't matter. You should make those decisions based on the merits and not based on re-election.
That's really funny coming from Tommy Vietor, the former spokesman for Obama's NSA, National Security Council. Joining us now, the man who broke the story of Bannon getting at least taken off this Principals Committee, which is kind of an organizational structure for the National Security Council, and he joins us now. Bob, how are you? Bob Costa from the Washington Post. Good to talk to you.
Great to join you.
So a lot of cheering from a lot of people who didn't want Trump to win, either the never-Trumpers. They're thrilled about Bannon. Looks like he's getting elbowed. And certainly the Democrats are also very happy. They couch it by saying, well, this is because it's going to lead to there being a less of a chilling effect in the air at these important meetings. What's really going on inside the West Wing?
Well, what's going on, Laura, is General McMaster, who replaced General Flynn as National Security Advisor, is asserting himself within the West Wing He's a quiet presence, hasn't done interviews, hasn't made any speeches. But he's more of a traditionalist voice, and as much as he's been able to work closely with Bannon, he wants to make sure that political operatives are not on the Principals Committee, which is the senior group on the National Security Council. And he also wants to bring in more cabinet officials like Secretary Mattis at the Pentagon, Secretary of State Tillerson. So it's a reorganization, and Bannon already has a lot on his plate, many portfolios, and he has agreed to be removed from that committee and the NSC.
Did your reporting indicate that he threatened to quit? And Rebecca Mercer, a big donor to the GOP, also more of an economic populist, that she urged him not to?
Some of Bannon's friends tell me that he's very frustrated at times with the New York wing of the White House, meaning top economic advisor Gary Cohn, who used to be president of Goldman Sachs, Dina Powell, another Goldman Sachs executive, and even at times Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor. Cohn, for example, is a registered Democrat, and Bannon has had some clashes with them, to be sure, based on my reporting, on economics, on national security, on a variety of fronts. But he sees himself still as the beating heart of the president's base inside of the White House, and he's not heading toward the door.
We're talking to Bob Costa, writer for the Washington Post. Bob, the concern that a lot of the core Trump supporters have, and myself included, is that the very people who were scoffing at Trump, even ridiculing Trump during the campaign, completely dismissing his policy ideas, from the wall to getting tough on China trade, being less of an interventionist on foreign policy. Those people are the ones who are growing in influence. And an administration that was elected in part, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, on a populist agenda. And yet Democratic influences and more neoconservative influences, Bush influences, are growing. Do you think that's an unfounded concern of Trump's core constituency in those critical Rust Belt states?
It's a concern that has legitimacy, but it's a complicated question because the president has instincts that are populist and nationalist, and everyone around him who I talk to acknowledges that his instinct is in the Breitbart, Bannon, populist direction. But he doesn't have a core ideology that drives him in the same way progressivism drives Senator Warren, or nationalism really drives Bannon, or conservative movement drives Speaker Ryan. Sometimes the president, as we all know, can go in a different direction based on his gut, or even on a whim, or reacting to something in the news. So he's susceptible to influence based on my reporting. And while he likes Bannon, and his instinct is to go with Bannon, when he has Kushner and Cohn and Dina Powell and others around him within the Oval Office every hour, he is not always moving in that direction of the Republican base.
Well, I think that there's a sense that Donald Trump seeks legitimacy and to be legitimized in the eyes of a lot of these establishment people. I mean, he likes being liked, and that in and of itself is populist. He likes to be liked, but I would just go back to the way he won this surprise states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan. We're seeing now a neoconservative, perhaps, movement toward military intervention in Syria. We could go back and play 15 sound bites from Donald Trump talking about the Syrian rebels if we want, but I mean, that's a big switch from the campaign. And now we found out that Ivanka Trump was meeting secretly with Planned Parenthood to try to do outreach to Planned Parenthood. I mean, all those evangelical Christians who turned out to vote for Donald Trump despite his personal foibles in the past. I mean, I don't see the coalition he thinks he's going to appeal to if he goes to the Gary Cohn perspective.
It's an important point. I think when you look at the president's career, he has always run a family business, and so his family remains by his side, and that has real consequences. in terms of politics and policy, because Ivanka Trump, based on all my reporting, is trying to reach out to a lot of different women in the business community and the political community who are not necessarily conservative, and that includes the leadership of Planned Parenthood, who have been attacking her, but she's made overtures to them. Because just like her father, in a way, she does not have a core ideology on social issues and on many economic and foreign policy issues. Trump's instincts, as we saw during the campaign on foreign policy, were not interventionist. He was a harsh critic of intervention in Iraq throughout much of the campaign. But again, with Trump, and Laura, you've been around him a lot, whoever is near Trump at the moment sometimes matters most to Trump. That's why so many people hang around the president's press conferences, why they're always popping into the Oval Office. And that's the vulnerability for this presidency, that as much as he knows Bannon represents his constituency, Bannon's not the overwhelming presence that he once was within the West Wing.
And now we have this China summit in Mar-a-Lago over the weekend, at Mar-a-Lago, and we still don't have your U.S. trade rep, Bob Lighthizer, in place. He's still not confirmed, although he will be, but still not there. Many China experts concerned that this was, again, a Jared Kushner push to get this on the agenda. In a week where he met with the Jordanian leader, of course, the Egyptian leader, Sisi, and the deal with Gorsuch vote, and all these other things happening. Is there a crowding of this schedule that makes the real strategic planning and communications more difficult?
It is difficult, and there are tensions about what exactly to do on trade. You have Cohn and his group at the National Economic Council, and they've been clashing with Peter Navarro, who's a populist economist who's close with Bannon. And ahead of these China talks, I'm told that Bannon and Navarro and Cohn and his group are not getting along, and then Lighthizer not even there because he's not confirmed. And you got Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, with his own ideas. And so this is going to be another real test for the president. After spending 2 years on the campaign trail talking about China and how he's going to put it to him on currency manipulation and so many other fronts, there's not a coherent vision right now on exactly what this administration wants to do on China and on trade.
There's a piece today in CNN Politics how Ivanka Trump could be the secret weapon with China, because the first family is very popular as celebrities in China. Their kids are being raised to speak both Chinese and English. They have Chinese help, like nannies. Both Jared and Ivanka have Chinese nannies, and that's considered a big, a big tribute to China, that they would be raising their kids for dual language in Chinese. And so, they have a lot of business in China. Obviously, Ivanka's clothes are made in China. Jared's sought financing from Chinese banks, and so forth. Is there any potential, difficulty here with, I'm all for family. I think families could be your greatest advisors, but God, if they thought Bannon was a chilling effect in a National Security Council meeting because of his views, what is it like for staffers to have Jared and Ivanka in a meeting? Wouldn't that have a bit of a chilling effect?
No one wants to go against Jared or Ivanka. Now you have Ivanka Trump inside of the West Wing. She's a federal employee, not taking a salary, but still has to go by all the federal rules. And so they're a constant presence in the Oval Office around the president, and they're interesting figures to cover because they rarely do interviews with kind of the print reporter types like myself. They do some television. Jared does almost nothing. And they really operate quietly but with some ruthlessness around the administration, having their fingerprints on all aspects of foreign policy, diplomatic relations, domestic policy. And if you're kind of a lower-level staffer, you do not want to cross them, because there's a sense within the West Wing, whether right or not, that at the end of the day, Trump could purge everyone, as he has in the past in his businesses and his campaigns, but Jared and Ivanka will survive anything. And if they're always going to be there, well, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that.
Yeah, Beijing is keenly aware that Trump relies closely on a very small group of advisors that guide him on policy issues, including son-in-law Jared Kushner and daughter Ivanka Trump. And Ivanka gets glowing coverage from China's state media. Imagine if Bannon got good coverage in Russia. That would be a big issue. After her visit to the Chinese embassy in Washington, she was regarded as the most influential first daughter, and her words and deeds are also believed to carry more weight. And so she's known in China as the Bai Fumei, known as, and that's you translate that, Bob, into white, rich, and beautiful. That's in the Chinese state press. So this is kind of, she could be absolutely a secret weapon, but it might end up clashing with more of the economic populists on the West Wing. I was in the Reagan administration, 1987 and in 88, and there were conflicts, but I don't recall the conflicts being this pitched, Bob, this early, this pronounced, with one side hitting the other through proxies in the press. I've never seen anything like it, honestly, in all the years I've been in Washington.
It is unusual. It's kind of a feast if you're a reporter, but it's also nonstop. I think it comes down to the president himself. He likes a lot of the people around him, and he doesn't think about them as ideological rivals, even though they all are. And so, in a way, the president has always surrounded himself with power centers that compete. But it's just at such a different level now with the federal government, with the executive branch, that everyone feels vulnerable, that the knives are out, that everyone's talking to the press. And if you're not talking to the press, you're vulnerable. And it's created an atmosphere of tension, and what's coupled with that tension is the lack of legislative victories. There was this rush of activity on executive action early on, but now you see on Capitol Hill today and throughout the whole week, there's really been a push to revive health care because the president just wants to win, and he's talking to all of these aides all the time saying, when am I going to get something on health care? Why did this all fall apart? Can you guys even get me anything that I can sign?
Yeah, and they're all heading out for 2 weeks break. I mean, the president's going to Florida with the Sunshine Summit. Congress is all smiles and heading out of town. And meanwhile, Bob Costa's there to report on it all. Bob, it's always great to talk to you. Good work on the piece yesterday, breaking that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, we'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Don't go away. All right, let's go to Paula, Illinois, line 1. Paula's worried. Go ahead, Paula.
Yes, I'm very worried, Laura. I'm very concerned about Steve Bannon being bumped, and this deal with Jared and Ivanka. I think that there is a possibility that Jared is the leaker in the White House, and he's so aligned with Joe Scarborough. And this deal with Ivanka and Planned Parenthood.
Oh my God!
Mr.
I don't even. I lost.
Is,
my heart skipped a beat when I saw that.
Mine too, and I'm just so upset with Mr. President. I have lost family and friends because I have stood behind this president, and now he's turning.
Let's hope he's not.
Work, and
don't give up. Don't give up the ship yet. I think that we have to. It's our duty to raise the warning flag here. He could be pulled into a very, very bad direction if he pushes the populists out of the way. If he pushes them away and it's run by the Bushes and the Democrats, then we all know